Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Borash. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold, about to board an airplane to San Antonio, Texas for the general managers meetings. Back in the swing of things, back in the beat writer mode. How you doing today, Ev?
I'm doing great. Getting ready to go to the general manager meetings where a lot of groundwork is going to be laid for future deals, whether it's free agency, whether it's trades. You're going to have some of the agents there. You're going to have all of the president of baseball operations and general managers there. So some good things come in the offseason now, officially in full swing after the Dodgers beat the Yankees to win the World Series. The Dodgers beat the Yankees to win the World Series in Game 5, winning 7-6. That game was crazy. Game 5 was wild. The Dodgers were down big early in the game, but the Dodgers took advantage of so many mistakes by the Yankees in the 5th inning, even the score in the 5th, and then eventually took the lead in the 8th inning and never looked back. That 5th inning was just an absolute disaster for the Yankees. One of the worst innings in World Series history. You have center fielder Aaron Judge. He misses a routine flyout for the first error of his entire season, regular season and postseason. And then you have shortstop Anthony Volpe. He couldn't make an accurate throw to third base trying to get the lead runner. And then the worst of all, pitcher Garrett Cole didn't cover first base on what should have been an inning-ending ground out. Like, he just didn't cover the base. Yes, I understand Anthony Rizzo playing first base probably should have charged the ball, and that may have gotten the job done. But as a pitcher, you have to cover first base in that situation. And Garrett Cole just stood there watching the play. So after all that, the Dodgers scored 5 runs to tie the game in the 5th inning, eventually took the lead, and then they won the game to win the World Series. And that was so disappointing for the Yankees just because they absolutely threw away not only the game, but their chances to win the World Series. Because yes, they were down 3-0, but they won that game, and then they had a chance to win another game and go to LA, but instead they blew it there in the 5th inning. So Dodgers win in 5. And also, I hate to deliver bad news, but I think the Dodgers are going to extend the qualifying offer to right-hander Walker Buehler, which is a 1-year, $21 million contract. If he gets it, I would bet he accepts it in search of a full season of success, which therefore would take him off the market for the Tigers to sign at least this offseason. I've been talking about the Tigers signing Walker Buehler for to a 1-year bounce back, fix him type contract for months now. Probably not going to happen based on the postseason that he had, because he clearly fixed his fastball. He looked really good. I would not be surprised if the Dodgers extend the qualifying offer and then Walker Buehler takes it, $21 million in 2025, in search of hitting free agency again next offseason, hoping to get an even bigger contract over a longer period of time after that. Also, we got to give a shout out to Jack Flaherty, whom the Tigers signed, fixed, and traded to the Dodgers. Jack Flaherty is a World Series champion, and he looked like he had a lot of fun at that Los Angeles parade. I mean, who didn't have fun? I know he said he wants to stay with the Dodgers. We'll see if that actually happens, but hat tip to Jack Flaherty. Bad news on Walker Buehler, and man, tough times for the New York Yankees. They really screwed themselves in that Game 5. That was tough to watch.
I want to bring up 2 things about that inning. A lot of people think the Yankees sabotaged themselves, and God knows they did. But at the same time, you got to give a hat tip to one Freddie Freeman, one of the greatest 5-game World Series performances in World Series history. He was facing Garrett Cole throwing 98 with 2 out in the 5th and the bases jacked. He did come through with a solid single to center to make the score 5-3. And then what about Teoscar Hernandez? How many times in these playoffs did he come up with a big swing, first pitch, bomb off the top of the fence and center to tie the game? So, yeah, the Yankees created a problem for themselves, but at the same time, the Dodgers, they took advantage of it, and it was nothing cheap about how they took advantage. And don't forget the sacrifice 5 by Mookie Betts later. Big play, no problem. Dodgers play a good brand of baseball, missing an entire starting rotation, by the way, and still managed to win the World Series. So nothing cheap about it. All right, let's jump into the big 2. Question 1 of the big 2. The Tigers have a projected payroll of about $80 million, including one Javier Baez, for the 2025 season. How much money do we think they can realistically add to the books, or will they realistically add to the books? Thoughts?
They have all the room to add as much money as they want to add this offseason. to an extent, of course. But yeah, I mean, $25 million of that is tied up in Javier Baez, $10 million in Kenta Maeda, $3.8 million in Colt Keith. Those are the guaranteed contracts. Everybody else is either arbitration eligible or pre-arbitration eligible. And if you're pre-arbitration eligible, you're making the big league minimum. And if you're arbitration eligible, your highest paid ARB player is going to be Tarek Skubal, projected to make $8 million in his second year of arbitration. Players have 3 years of arbitration when they're between 3 and 6 years of service time. Once you hit 6 years, you become a free agent. Anybody before 3 years, it's pre-arbitration, so they're pretty much making the minimum. So there's not a lot of money on the books. And again, $25 million of that $80 million is tied up in Javi Baez. So I think the Tigers have the flexibility to be able to spend quite a bit if they want to do that. If they didn't make any additions, none, their payroll for 2025 would be among the bottom 3 teams in MLB, probably only ahead of the Athletics. So they have no reason not to spend. Will they spend big? They sure can. The big question is like, how much are they actually going to spend? This is a team that just went to the postseason. They need to return to the postseason in 2025. They cannot afford to take a step backwards. And there can't be any excuses for not getting there because of where the payroll is at. So on 2024 opening day, the Minnesota Twins, for example, they ranked 20th at $124 million. I don't think the Tigers will vault into the top 10 in payroll, but shouldn't they be able to jump well inside the top 20 in payroll? So I think about $140 million would firmly put them inside the top 20. So that's an addition of about $60 million onto the books for 2025. You have your $80 million right now, plus $60 million. There's your 140. You're firmly inside the top you're probably inside the top 17 at that point of payroll, right around the middle of the pack. And I think that's a good spot for the Tigers to get to next year. I think that's realistic. So here's a quick example, more so than a prediction, just an example. But like, let's add $60 million to the 2025 payroll. Let's say you sign third baseman Alex Bregman for 6 years, $160 million. There's $27 million per year. That leaves us with another $33 million to play with in 2025. Then you go add right-hander Luis Severino for 2 years, $30 million. There's $15 million per year, leaving us at $18 million remaining for 2025. And then let's say they go get right-handed reliever Clay Holmes, 2 years, $18 million. There's $9 million per year. That gives us $9 million remaining in 2025. And then let's just throw out Carlos Santana. Say the Tigers want to do a cheap 1-year deal for a first baseman. Carlos Santana, 1 year, $7 million contract. That leaves us with $2 million remaining in 2025, and we'll stop there. So when you talk about adding $60 million, if you're just spitballing, like it kind of is like an Alex Bregman, a Luis Severino, a Clay Holmes, a Carlos Santana, like that group of players gets you pretty close to $60 million added to the 2025 payroll. Now, obviously, a guy like Bregman, he cost you in 2026, 2027, 2028, and so on and so forth. But if we're talking about adding to the 2025 payroll, that's a little bit of an example of like how they get it done. So for me, I think adding $60 million in payroll, that's a fair expectation. They made it to the postseason. They need to get back to the postseason and make an even deeper run. They have so much financial flexibility to improve their roster externally via free agency and trade in ways that they can't internally. Unless the Tigers think unless they think Jace Young is the next Alex Bregman. And yes, Jace Young has gritty leadership qualities. He's not going to win a Gold Glove award at third base. So the Tigers should probably go ahead and sign a legit third baseman, whether that's Alex Bregman or not. Or the same thing can be said about first base. Maybe you go and get a Christian Walker if Spencer Torkelson, you don't think he's going to be the real deal at first base, at least in the short term. So they have financial flexibility to improve externally if they feel like they can't improve internally with the guys they have, in that room right now. I think $60 million is fair. I think that's a realistic expectation, and that's kind of where I'm at with these guys moving into the offseason.
I think Marian Illich is going to listen to this podcast and probably immediately call her nurse if she thinks you're going to spend $60 million. She's going to be calling her son, Christopher, and go, I heard a guy say we're going to spend $60 million. I'm extremely nervous about that, and I'm not spending $60 million more dollars on the Detroit Tiger baseball team. No, I think that realistically, the ceiling's $60 million. If they don't get Bregman, it'll come in much closer to 115 to 120. Yeah, I'm more than happy to help you spend the money. I would have spent it a little differently than the mock spending of Evan Petzold, but it was just for fun, and we haven't even gotten it. I was just trying to temper down the insanity of people that will listen to this podcast and say, Evan Petzold said, we should sign the following players. And I want to make sure you understand that is not even close to what either one of us thinks is going to happen this offseason. But yes, there's going to be somewhere between, say, $40 and $60 million spent. The 60 will happen if, in fact, they're successful at signing Alex Bregman. That's probably the if and only if way they spend that much money. And yes, they need to raise payroll. And yes, there is going to be 2.5 million people in the park next year if, in fact, the Tigers are anywhere close to as entertaining as they were the last 60 days of the 2024 season. And an extra 1 million fans in the ballpark equates to about $50 million in revenues. So asking them to spend another $50 million if they're going to make in revenues another $50 million is probably not a real big ask. All right. So question 2 of the big 2, should the Tigers try to trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? And before everybody faints wondering if this is a good idea, I want to tell you, I've presented this to me about a week ago. At first, I was like, what are you talking about? And then I thought about it for about 60 seconds. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought was, this is an inspired piece of beat writer genius. This is exactly what they should be thinking about doing. You want to talk about going for it? This is going for it. And the fact that you may not be able to retain him after, so the hell what? You got José Briseño. He's going to be ready to play in 2026. You got a replacement if it doesn't work out. So, Ev, explain to him the idea and what your thoughts are behind it.
Yeah, so first off, imagine these players taking the field on 2025 opening day. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at first base, Alex Bregman at third base, Colt Keith at second base, Riley Green in left field, Parker Meadows in center field, Kerry Carpenter in right field, with Tarek Skubal as the starting pitcher. That's pretty awesome. That is a really fun team. That is a World Series caliber team. That's a team that has a chance to win it all. No question about it. If you add Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Alex Bregman onto your roster going into 2025, I think the reality of the situation is that Skubal's under team control for the next 2 seasons before entering free agency. If the Tigers aren't going to be able to sign Tarek Skubal to a contract extension, which I don't think that's going to be easy to do. This is a left-hander who throws 99 and absolutely paints, and he's going to win the Cy Young. That's a guy who's going to want to get to free agency and see how much money he can get. I understand the concept of blank check, but it's not always as easy as that. And also, Tarek Skubal would want to stay in Detroit, and he would want to be here long term. And he's never really gotten too deep into talking about that. He said that he likes pitching here, but again, I don't think it's as easy to say, oh yeah, just sign into a contract extension. It's that easy to do. Those things are never easy to do. So I think the Tigers can't sign Tarek Skubal to a contract extension. Then they got to give themselves the best chance to win the World Series with him on the roster in 2025, in 2026. And to get there, I think the Tigers would be wise to replace first baseman Spencer Torkelson, at least in the short term. I don't think Torkelson has much trade value unless he's going to the Colorado Rockies. I don't think the Tigers would want to maybe give up on Torkelson, and nor should they. Would it be the worst thing in the world for Torkelson to spend a full season in AAA Toledo unless he's needed as an injury replacement? Maybe he's a late bloomer and turn things around by 2026. It's unlikely, but I don't think that's an impossible outcome for Torkelson, who has shown so many flashes of being a good hitter. I mean, he did hit 31 home runs, but I don't think you can count on him to slug in the middle of the lineup, not in 2025. So anyway, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., let's go for it. Here's the mock trade that I came up with. Tigers acquire first baseman Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Blue Jays acquire right-hander Reese Olson, second baseman, third baseman Jace Young, right-hander Matt Manning, and shortstop Jose Dixon. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's under team control for one more season, projected to earn approximately $30 million in his final year of salary arbitration before entering free agency after the 2025 season. He's going to want a lucrative, decade-long Juan Soto-like contract. He hit .323 with 30 home runs and a .940 OPS in 159 games in the 2024 season. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball for the last 4 years. It's unlikely the Blue Jays will trade Guerrero this offseason, but if they realize that they can't sign him to a contract extension, and if they miss out on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, and if they commit to reorganizing their roster with a focus on the future, maybe they will trade him. Maybe they will move on and look to the future. Or what happens if the Blue Jays need money to go and sign Juan Soto? And they are going to make a real run at him and they want to free up some salary and they're going to go after Juan Soto and maybe they figure they might need some pitching. Well, Reese Olson would certainly help. So I think the return for Guerrero in this mock trade, it benefits them both now and in the future. Or Olson is like a borderline all-star pitcher under team control through the 2029 season. Jace Young under team control through the 2030 season. Matt Manning under team control through the 2027 season. Jose Dixon still in the Dominican Summer League. I think for a trade like this to happen for the Tigers, though, they would need to sign Bregman and just be all in on winning a championship in 2025. And if Guerrero isn't available this offseason, maybe the Tigers sign a guy like Carlos Santana to a one-year deal and revisit the Guerrero trade at the trade deadline. But again, like the Tigers probably won't be able to trade for him and then sign him to a long-term contract extension. Like remember when they did that with Miguel Cabrera in December 2007, they traded for him. And then by March 2008, they signed him to the contract extension. Well, he had 2 years left on his contract. The big difference, Guerrero has just 1 year remaining. He's been with the Blue Jays for nearly 10 years. He's a famous teenage international free agent who obviously, has had a ton of money. Like he doesn't need to take care of his family. His family's already well taken care of. And it's almost impossible to imagine that he would throw away the opportunity to reach the open market. But I don't think the Tigers would be able to sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if they traded for him. The big question that I have for you, Mark, is Vladimir Guerrero Jr., would you do it? Would you give up Reese Olson, Jace Young, Matt Manning, and Jose Dixon for 1 year of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., knowing that there's almost no chance that you're going to sign that guy to a long-term contract extension? He's going to want to be a free agent. Do you still make that trade anyway, knowing that you're probably only getting 1 year of Vlad for Reese Olson, Jace Young, Matt Manning, and Jose Dixon? Do you do it, Mark?
100% yes. And I don't even need to get into the details of why I say yes, but how do you not say yes to getting one of the best hitters in baseball to hit in the middle of your lineup when you desperately need both power and offensive production? And besides the fact he's a right-hand hitter, you want to go for it in 2025 and you're going to...
Because Reese Olson has the upside of a number 2 long-term and he's under team control for a really long time. He's under team control through 2029. So you're going to give that up for 1 year of Vlad Jr.?
Yeah, I am. Because guess what? The best part of Tiger player development has been the last 2 seasons, developing pitching. And you know what? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Okay. Nobody wins afraid of losing. In the famous words of Chris Stapleton, got to give something to get something. You want to be serious? You got to do serious things. So the other question I want to ask you about this is, look, have the Tigers demonstrated they have the capacity to do 2 things? Identify pitching and polish and improve pitchers, notwithstanding Casey Mize and Matt Manning. Do you think they're pretty good at it? Are they a destination now for pitching? Are they going to manufacture pretty good pitchers? I mean, nobody thought Reese Olson would be really, really good aside from 6 good closing weeks in the 2023 season. Wasn't like Reese Olson was some giant, valuable, polished piece. He had 7 good starts at the end of the year, and he kind of intrigued you. Then he was really, really good for 2 months. So when I say to you, who was kind of like that? Cater Montero. Cater Montero was really pretty damn good the last 6 weeks of the season. So you're going to tell me now you got Jackson Jobe and Cater Montero and we can't replace Reese Olson? I understand how valuable and interesting Reese Olson is right now, but a year ago, he wasn't that valuable or that interesting. So, if you have the capacity to develop and procure pitching as a destination, you're going to trade some pitching, especially to get a bat the caliber of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. think it's an inspired, great idea. I also think that we probably gave the Tigers front office some anxiety as soon as they listened to this podcast today. So, as far as being willing to go for it, hell yes, let's go for it. I think it's a great idea. It's one of the best ideas you ever had. Almost as good as Shota Imanaga last winter, by the way. All right. We're going to take a break for 60. And when we come back, we have just about the most interesting interview we've ever done on Days of Roar. We have Tiger manager AJ Hinch. We'll be back in 60.
I'd like to welcome AJ Hinch, manager of the Detroit Tigers, to the Days of Roar podcast for the first time. AJ, congrats on a great season and thanks for joining us. But most importantly, thanks for bringing postseason baseball back to Detroit.
Man, that was incredible and a great experience. I'm really proud of our team, of our season. I mean, what a journey. And obviously we are very proud of that, but we really feel like the work's just begun and we got a lot of work to do.
So the weekend before Halloween, I saw you double dipped with the Lions game and the Wings game. Rumor has it the fans at Ford Field got really loud when they showed you on the video board. Was that your first Lions game?
It was my first Lions game. I'd never been in that building before. I'd been to the practice facility. I've got to know a few of the people over there, but I hadn't gone to a game, so I was in town. And what a reception. It's so fun to go down on the field and watch them warm up and like the coach in me wants to see like their process, like how do they get ready for a game? What's their batting practice like, or what's their pregame infill like, the things that we do in their sport. And it's really cool to do that. They asked me to do a shout out for the board and the fans went crazy. So that was really, really awesome to experience that and see the sports fans in Detroit, are starting to emerge as seeing some pretty good teams, across the sports, and the Lions being one of them, but now the Tigers being in the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, curious about Tigers fans too. When you were hired to manage the Tigers back in October of 2020, did Justin Verlander give you a heads up on what to expect when it comes to postseason baseball in Detroit? I mean, I know you had a taste of it with Miguel Cabrera, but from your seat, like the atmosphere on the night you clinched and then those playoff games, what was that like?
Yeah, so when I got the job, it was more about just the fan base in general, like the Detroit logo, the English D around the state of Michigan, what the Tigers mean to all the people who follow the Tigers. Like that was, JV and Miguel. Miguel was obviously on this team, or Curtis Granderson, who I've come across quite a bit in my career, like guys that have played here, at its height, they tell you how great it is and how the state supports you. And they're right. Obviously we had to earn that. We've had to come a long way to get to, relevant baseball or competitive baseball or things that matter, late in season. And so then when we did that, the fans did their part, turning Comerica into a madhouse in all the positive ways of creating an atmosphere that the players had only experienced in ceremonies, the Miguel Cabrera retirement, the Jim Leland, number retirement, the just big events, opening day, like all that was cool, but we actually earned the back end of this season and into the playoffs about this team and about these players and about this group.
AJ, big picture question. You've been the manager for 4 seasons. What's some of the core philosophies? We've actually kind of call it the AJ Hinch way now. It's, how do you get players to buy in? You've created a culture. It's based on a lot of things: baseball aptitude, courage, self-awareness, willingness to fail, taking one game at a time. But discuss a little bit about the evolution of how you implement that over the 4 seasons.
Yeah. So, it's a great question because I get, everything from asked to poke fun at, like all my little one-liners or my, one game win and then try to win series and try to win weeks and months. Like all of that came out of trying to instill a mindset on a team that, quite honestly didn't really have a way at the time. When I got here, we talk about winning. Like, hey, everybody wants to win. That's why you sign up. Like all the things that matter. I think the players started to gravitate towards how do we do it? Like, how do we actually win? Or how do we, what is the mindset behind a team that's won? And when you start bringing in, my coaching staff, a lot of guys had won, and then you start bringing in sprinkling players, and then you start winning at the minor league level, which, helped this year's team with guys that had galvanized around the AA championship last year. And all of those little ingredients, I think are what we've tried to instill here. I mean, I say everything matters all the time. Everything matters. Like whether it's a detail on your primary lead, whether it's a positioning card, we're a little bit off to where it's first pitch strikes, to where it's, understanding that when I pinch hit so much, I'm not taking you out of the game. I'm putting somebody into the game to give ourselves the best chance to win. Like if you're willing to do it, then we can take a step forward. And so, kind of piece by piece, year by year, we've been able to, to stack some positive gains in those areas. And then this year's team, I tell you what, but the back half of this season, this young group that came up really did open their hearts and say, hey, we can do whatever we have to do to win. And then they went out and did it. And the players really bought into focusing on every single detail that George Lombard goes over in the base running meeting or the defensive positioning meeting, or when Joey Cora obsesses over the depth of which the infielders play. Like we bombard these players with every sort of little detail, and they just kept asking for more and then going out and performing. So the players, the buy-in part of it is really set by the players inside that clubhouse of what type of chemistry they can build. But then we prove to ourselves how beneficial that can be down the stretch in these important wins.
How did you see the team in 2024 embrace those philosophies, right? Like not only in the 31-11 run, but also throughout the entire season, because the run was improbable, sure, but they seemed prepared for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we talk a lot about it. You never quite know how these meetings go in the early part of the season. And you talk about, the importance of the bullpen decisions that go in the middle of the game. And as those started to get sooner and sooner into the game, how are those guys going to respond? Or you talk about pinch hitting, and I know we could have a whole podcast on pinch hitting and what people think about that. And when Kerry Carpenter goes out of the game, I know what that means. Or when you insert somebody off the bench and what we expect them to do. Those philosophies and those conversations were not like, hey, on August 1st, we're going to decide to do these things. We've been training for these opportunities a ton and asking a lot out of their routines to be ready to play every day. And I think once they saw a little bit of success of that, and once we started to feel that was a good path to a win for us, then it was really easy. I got to the point, like late in the season, the guys were wondering why I didn't do something more than why I did something. And I think the players sort of being open books to like, use me however you want, and I'm going to be ready for the next day. That really grabbed a hold. I think it's part of it is the personalities of this team. I think part of it is, the willingness. If you're really willing to win, like how could you argue with the type we're using almost 20 plus players a game, and it was producing wins? Like, are you going to walk in my office and say, hey, I don't buy in? Like, no, man, you're going to do your part to try to make this a playoff team. And we did it.
All right. So let's talk about the famous breakfast meeting with Scott after the trade deadline. He comes to you, regarding the opener strategy. I'm sure he had an entire packet of data. Talk to us a little bit about it, how you workshopped it together, and then, what happened and what does it say about in general. I'm sure, it's in any work environment. When you have an idea, you implement something together and it works, it kind of takes your relationship with your coworker, especially in an executive position, to that next level. So talk a little bit about the meeting and what maybe it's done long-term for you and Scott together building.
Yeah. So that meeting is long. It was thorough, and we had to cover a lot. Obviously the pitching strategy came out of it, but we were in a really, really weird spot at that point as a team and as an organization. We had just sold and traded some players away. And I love this about Scott. Like, he takes it as what's the next opportunity, not sort of dragging into the emotions of of what just happened. I mean, nobody wants Jack Flaherty to go off your team and Carson Kelly and Andrew Chafin and Mark Canna. I mean, and Evan knows as well, having interact. These are tremendous dudes, like great guys to be around. Every day you look forward to seeing them. And they really did help some of our young players take a step forward in their development. And so what you're seeing out of Tarek or Riley or Carp or Colt Keith, who had a difficult start to the season and a strong finish, like there were a lot of their fingerprints were on this team. And so when you take those off the team, just the emotion alone of like, man, we have a different team. We had to get through that. Then it became Scott was really the engine behind what's the next opportunity. And we started to hash out what are the strengths of our team. And we talked through the different pitchers. And then when you looked up, you're like, man, we're pretty good with length, both in the big leagues and in AAA. We have a lot of arms that we can throw at you, which then led to a little bit of like how are we going to use Tyler Holton? How can we capture some of the momentum of Will Vest? And how can we mix and match it, with Malloy starting to emerge? And then we have some new players that off in the horizon, including Trey Sweeney, who he had just traded for like the day before. And we started to just, piece it together. And we looked up, we're like, we got a lot of good players. We've got to find a way to use them the best way we can. And kind of what came out of that was, a way to break in young players, young pitchers specifically, and a way to maximize how difficult it is to beat us if we can give them as many looks as possible. And so that's where like Brant Herter and Ty Madden and even off in the future, Jackson Jobe, like those names, Brian Sammons came up. We started to use our guys, uniquely, and it came from an idea hatched in realizing we have a lot more good players than we gave ourselves credit for if we can just, use them creatively to maximize their upside.
One guy who's still young in his career and did not need an opener is Tarek Skubal. You've managed Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole, Zach Greinke, Dallas Keuchel, many others. Everyone's a little bit different. Some guys are a lot different, but what makes Tarek Skubal different and what stood out about his Cy Young caliber season?
Yeah, I don't know if it makes him different as much as it makes him himself. Is his unique qualities is like this dude's authentic. Like what the emotion you see is the emotion he feels. The chip on his shoulder is because of the perseverance through, injury and maybe a late bloomer into the top prospect category, right? Like people weren't talking about him in this type of impact. We all look back now, like, what? I always knew Tarek Skubal was going to be good. Like, and I'm not sure people put their name on him until he actually broke through and became a beast. And so what I love about Tarek is his number one priority is to win the game that he pitches. Like, he only gets to play every 5 or 6 days, and he's obsessed with winning the day that he pitches. Our team feels that. Secondly, he's made adjustments. Like this wasn't a magic carpet ride of like a premium prospect all the way through the minors, and it's the same pitch repertoire, the same usage, or the same even mentality. Like he became a dominant strike thrower. Like not just, hey, I throw strikes. Like no, a dominant strike thrower with elite stuff. And he's had to make some adjustments along the way with pitch grips and delivery and where he is on the rubber and how to properly use his stuff to impact the hitter the most. Like that as a development story, that is a story of perseverance. That is a story of elite ability. And all of it came together in an epic season that, is as good as I've been around. JV won the Cy Young. Dallas Keuchel won the Cy Young. I don't think it's hard to predict who's going to win the Cy Young this year, but those seasons are incredible to watch up close and personal because you know what happened behind the scenes to get there.
Hey, Jay, you can't talk about Tarek Skubal without talking about Jake Rogers. He caught all of Scoob's starts. What's his impact both on, Tarek, the entire pitching staff, and more importantly, the culture of the team. Jake is such a big part of the culture. So,
man, he's so incredible. Jake is so fun. I mean, obviously, he and I go at it all the time. The more you're around our team, the more you'd see it in a fun banter all the way to like, I see a lot of how he impacts our team. And so we want him to be as dialed in preparation wise as anybody. And he is. Obviously it's funny. Like in my heart of hearts, I would stay away from the personal catcher, but he would have had to have been on one leg or not be able to throw the ball back to the mound for me not to catch Jake Rogers with Scooble. And so, I think the way he approaches the game is awesome. I mean, he's the one position behind the plate. I say this all the time. You're the one position at catcher where the whole team is looking at you. So your body language matters. Your timing of your mound visit matters. Your overall vibe matters. And Jake, has a free spirit. He is, pretty laid back, but just enough intense to change the room if he needs to dial it in. It's not the one size fits all approach. I see him differently when he catches Scooble versus Reese, versus every playoff inning, where we're mixing and matching, 9 or 8 or 9 relievers in Houston to clinch the wild card series. So he's adaptable, and that, part of what makes Jake unique is he brings it every day. Like if you show up, he's one of the first guys that shows up to breakfast. So I eat with him a lot. It's the same, there'll be something edgy about him, or there'll be something on his mind, or, we can poke fun at him quite a bit for the stash or the big swings and some of the random things he does on the field. But when the competition starts, I trust him. And that's a big statement for me to another catcher. And that's why I caught him every inning of every playoff game. He could impact the season, in such a positive way.
It's easy to forget too that he was one of the oldest guys on the team at 29 years old. Like, you had such a young team and so much success, obviously, but developing young hitters in an era where pitching is the best that it's ever been. Like, what's the biggest challenge in doing that? And how do you think your hitting department had success, both with individuals and with the team as a whole? Because it was such a young group.
Yeah, so the hitting thing is a real topic, because not only is it matched up with the hardest era to hit in, it's also matched with the highest scrutiny, the fastest. Like, literally, there's reactions to every at-bats on social media and throughout the industry, inning by inning. So that we used to talk about 100 at-bats being a barometer for a guy settling in. 100 at-bats. Do you think, like, social media has patience for 100 at-bats before we render a judgment? Like, no, that's not the era that we live in. So young hitters are getting pulled at in a lot of different ways. The second part, or another part that is interesting, is everybody has a guy. Like, everybody has a personal coach. Everybody has people in their ear. These young hitters come up, and it's hard to marry the same message to a hitter. Your coaching staff plus the coaching staff they just had, plus, could be a longtime coach, brother, friend, father, uncle, anybody that can sprinkle some advice in. It can get sort of overwhelming for a young hitter. That's in play as well. So our hitting department is really good. And and by the way, the hitting department is not judged by exactly what the group does as a whole, but should be looked at a lot of the individual contributions throughout the year. If you look at what Colt Keith developed into, you look at Wenzel Perez coming up and transitioning to the big leagues. You look at what Matt Vierling did of getting the ball elevated this year, a lot more than he did last season. Those are all small gains. Like, sometimes we look at the broad hitting department by how the team offense does, but within those is a ton of development and a ton of progress. I think our guys, it's funny, but my group will say to me all the time, like, they're never allowed to have a good day. And the reason is because you could have a 10-run outburst and win the game 10-2, and probably 2 or 3 of the 9 hitters that started, and probably the pinch hitter who came off the bench, didn't have a good day. So guess where those guys go to? Like, they go to the hitting department to get some help. And so, yeah, we had a great day. We scored 10 runs. These 3 guys are absolutely losing their mind in the cage after the game because they don't feel good, or they don't have a good swing, or they didn't have great results. So there's a ton of pressure on the hitting department. There's a ton of attention that's put on them. Our group does a good job of breaking them out individually, both psychologically and mechanically, to give them a chance against that pitcher that night. And I think we have one of the better game planning coaches in Michael Bedard, who really does call the plays early. Like if you think of football now, it calls the plays early and then audibles during the game. You'll see hitters go over to the iPad with him all the time before they go on the on-deck circle. They are the last coach to talk to a hitter before they go on the on-deck circle and have these monstrous at-bats. So I'm proud. We're going to bring it back, obviously, and I'm proud of the group's, growth within my coaching staff.
Wanted to switch gears and talk about the playoffs for a second. AJ, for you, getting back to the postseason for the first time since 2019 when you were with the Astros, have you reflected yet on what that meant to you? I mean, it wasn't quite a decade, but 4 years was a long time.
It was a long time. And obviously we all want it to happen every year. I said this to our group. Once you play in 1 October, you want to play in all of them. My first playoff as a manager was in 2015. We were able to put a really good run together while I was in Houston. And then we got here and it's been a steady build towards the reward of getting to play in the playoffs now. And then what's going to be the next topic is we all want to be a playoff team, every year and starting next year. So I think for me personally, I love October. I love it as a fan. I love it as a coach. I love it as a player. Like it is the reason that you get to spring training early and get underway is to see if you can match up and play in October. So I think the reward is watching these players get to experience it for the first time. Or I had a few coaches that had never been in the playoffs as a coach, like guys like Fett and Robin Lund and like I said, the Keith Beauregard and Lance Zawatsky, 2 hitting coaches. Michael had been there. Obviously, Joey had been in the playoffs. Juan had been in the playoffs. Cienko had never been in the playoffs in the big league. So my coaching staff got to enjoy what October means. And then these players, man, like watching them like mature and grow and be able to handle, all of the growing attention and go out and win a series in Houston, be in a position to win a series and then have heartfelt losses in game 4 and 5. Like that's why you do this as a coach or as a manager is to live it through your players and their joy that group played with throughout the postseason.
One of my favorite memories too is the night you guys clinched. You were in the clubhouse. I think you had a beer in your right hand and a beer in your left hand, and then you poured those beers all over Chris Fetter. And there's a great photo of it too. What was that like for you, and what's it been like working with Fett?
Yeah, no, I mean those celebrations never get old, and it's probably hard to fully understand like what that joy is. But when you see the owner in there and the president and the GM and business ops people, you have your coaching staff, you have the players, the clubbies, the trainers, like everybody involved in the operation is in there celebrating, success like that. Those celebrations are awesome. Chris Fetter is obviously somebody I'm very, very close with. I've talked endlessly about his impact with the players, but also within my staff and on me, and his consistency day in and day out, his ability to draw out the most out of his players that he coaches, his timing on whether it's adjustments that need to be made or changes on the game plan or in-game calm things down is elite. I think he was my first hire that I ever had in Detroit, begging him to come join us and build this, this organization in a better direction. And he's awesome. And he, he's understated. He doesn't say much to anybody outside the circle, but his impact is very well known by the players. Like the players know that of what he can do to help them have a better career and a better season.
All right. Before we get out of here, got to ask the $1 million question. 2024 is over. We're getting ready to go to 2025. We got the GM meetings coming up this week. How's the 2025 Tigers going to be different than the 2024 Tigers? And I'd like to bring into part of this question the fact, look, when you broke through in 2015 with the Astros, you had the same record in 2016, didn't make the playoffs. Making the playoffs is really, really hard. So talk a little bit about these two things.
Yeah, I mean, those, it's funny. I have one of my coaches always says the moment's over as soon as something happens, and then you got to move on to the next thing. And we've got to be able to have two thoughts in our minds. Scott and I talk about this all the time, is you have to be able to be proud of what you did and celebrate accordingly and enjoy, what 2024 was. And then you got to be driven to move on and get to the next step, which is 2025. Every team's different. I say that to my team every year. No team is ever the same. And we're not going to try to replicate 24 because that's in the past. Like, give you an analogy is when you run, if you run with your head forward, you're going to run faster than if you run looking backwards. And so we are going to look forward and we are going to get to the next step. We need development out of these guys. We have guys that need to get a lot better. And that's good. I mean, obviously we're in a good place with Parker and we're in a good place with Riley and, we're in a good place with Tarek and, our bullpen pieces largely are coming back. Like that's all really good sign, but we've got to be able to get a little bit better across the board, for us to stack the wins that we need to stack over the course of next season. And then obviously, the changes to a team and the roster construction and how I'm going to manage it is all going to happen over time. Like we realize what eyes are going to be on us. They're going to be on the front office and how this offseason goes. They're going to be on spring when we roll out and people are going to look at us a little bit differently because of the run that we made and because of the playoff appearance and winning a playoff series for the first time in a long time. You can rest assured that I'm not going to look a lot different. I'm going to get these guys refocused on the task at hand because it takes 6 really good months to get to where we want to get to. So we'll focus on all those details throughout the offseason and then when we get into the spring.
All right, AJ, that's all we have for you. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your insight. And again, congratulations on your success this season. It was awesome to cover.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Everyone, that was AJ Hinch, manager of the Detroit Tigers. After talking about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at the top of the show, we're going to wrap things up by discussing 3 other first basemen the Tigers could acquire in a trade after the break.
All right, we're back. It was very interesting discussing things with AJ Hinch. A lot of fun stuff covered. No, we're not going to ask them who they'd like to pursue or if they'll pursue them this offseason because he's not going to tell you. It's the GM meetings this week. Free agency starts. No one's going to tell you anything. So we're not going to ask if he's not going to tell. But I hope that you enjoyed all the rest of the questions we asked. All right, I want to jump into something. In your article in the Freak today, you also mentioned 3 backup deals for a first baseman. So besides having the possibility of signing Christian Walker in free agency, we also discussed 3 other deals. So why don't you share them with us? Share the 3 players, share the deals, and we can discuss it real quick.
Yeah, the other 3 deals were for Yandy Diaz, Rhys Hoskins, and Ryan Mountcastle. I want to start with Yandy Diaz. I have the Tigers acquiring first baseman Yandy Diaz and the Tampa Bay Rays acquiring right-hander Casey Mize and right-hander Troy Melton. Yandy Diaz, I mean, it's way more realistic than trading for Guerrero, but the Rays, they've actually been reluctant to consider offers for Diaz in the recent past. This is a guy who has been the best hitter on the Rays team, and the Rays do have a below-average offense, so he has been their best player for quite some time. It's interesting. His .303 batting average ranks 5th among 230 qualified hitters over the past 3 seasons. And among the same 230 qualified hitters, his .838 on base percentage ranks 6th. He won the batting title in 2003. So Yandy Diaz can hit. He's under contract for $10 million in 2025 with a $12 million team option for 2026. So the Tigers would have him for 2 seasons, which I think, and you mentioned Jose Briseño, I think bridging the gap with Jose Briseño in 2027 is a lot more natural than forcing it in 2026. Like that sounds a lot better to me. So I almost like the idea of the fact that you could have Yandy Diaz for 2 years and then you could bridge that gap to Jose Briseño without having to rush him at all. I think that's probably the smart play there, considering the guy's only played, 25 some games at the low A level, it seems like. I mean, he had the injury and then sure, he's raked in the fall league, but Jose Briseño does not have a lot of experience yet. So I like that idea of having somebody for 2 years. And then for Casey Mize and Troy Melton, the return in that mock trade, Casey Mize is a guy who is a slider away from being a back of the rotation starter with mid-rotation upside. If he can't find the slider, probably push to a long-term stay in the bullpen. Troy Melton, by the way, he ranks as the Tigers' number 11 prospect. He made 23 starts in Double-A Erie with a 5.10 ERA. It was his second full season in the minor leagues. He has the pitch mix and the command to develop into an MLB starter, possibly as soon as late 2025. So, Mark, I want to ask you, Tigers acquire Yandy Diaz, Rays acquire Casey Mize and Troy Melton. If you're the Tigers, are you doing it? If you're the Rays, are you doing it? What do you think?
I think the Rays are doing it. Yandy Diaz is not getting any younger. They got the batting title year. He's about a 115 to 125 WRC plus type of player, pretty consistent, typically over a 10% walk rate, 15 to 20 jacks. But a guy that gets on base a lot, 370, 380, OBP kind of guy. Yeah, he's getting a little long in the tooth, but I think he fills the bill for what they're asking him to do, really rakes against left-handers. I think it's an outstanding trade. And I mean, you're giving up Casey Mize and, Casey Mize, how long are you going to wait? I mean, you have one of the best pitching labs in baseball, and for 5 years into it, he still can't spin a slider consistently, won't throw a cutter. He's got a split that basically was good for one inning this year. So, yeah, I'm a little tired on Casey Mize. And that's not for a lack of appreciating he's throwing 2 miles an hour faster, or the fact he's rehabbed from an injury and, he has some possibilities. But we got 5 years into this now. It's not going to wave a wand over him and all of a sudden he's going to be good. Come on. Troy Melton, pitching prospects, they say, Tinsap, there is no such thing as a pitching prospect. So I'm all on board. You want to win in 2025, you got to get better. That's the way to get better, is getting Yandy Diaz. All right, talk to me about Rhys Hoskins.
Yeah, the Rhys Hoskins mock trade. I have the Tigers acquiring Rhys Hoskins, first baseman, of course, and the Brewers acquiring right-hander Dylan Smith. Look, it wasn't a surprise when Hoskins exercised his $18 million player option to return to the Brewers in 2025. He's not worth that price tag. He's literally the Brewers' second highest paid player. So a salary dump could be in the cards, especially because the Brewers have a prospect in Tyler Black ready to start at first base. The contract also has an $18 million mutual option for 2026 with a $4 million buyout, which any team, whether it's the Tigers or the Brewers, or if any other team acquires Rhys Hoskins, you're probably declining that mutual option unless Hoskins experiences a significant resurgence in his production at the plate. He hit .214 with 26 home runs. That was impressive. He still was able to hit the ball a long way, ran into 26 home runs. That was good to see. But he had a career worst in batting average at .214, on base percentage at .303, OPS at .722, and strikeout rate at 28.8%. It was an ugly downfall from what he had done over, a long stretch of his career. From 2017 to 2022, he hit .242 with an .846 OPS and a 24% strikeout rate. So he's striking out more than ever before, and he's not getting as many hits. He is a buy low, bounce back type candidate for the Tigers in a trade, which is why the return is only Dylan Smith, right? Dylan Smith has the prospect fame as a third-round pick in the 2021 draft, but his development has not progressed over the last 3 seasons, mainly because of injuries, but also he has the upside of a 2-pitch MLB reliever at this point. He's got an average fastball and an above-average slider, but he doesn't have the pitch mix to truly be a starter in the big league. So I think the Tigers could be ready to move on from Dylan Smith, and that's you're not really giving up a whole lot to get Rhys Hoskins, who, if Rhys Hoskins is the 2017 to 2022 version of himself, which is before he had the left ACL surgery that forced him to miss all of 2023, if you can get old Rhys Hoskins, you're going to be pretty happy with that. If you get 2024 Rhys Hoskins, you might not be so happy about that, but I still think it's an upgrade over Spencer Torkelson. So, Mark, Tigers acquire first baseman Rhys Hoskins. Brewers acquire right-hander Dylan Smith. If you're the Tigers, if you're the Brewers, do you do the deal?
Oh, hell no. When you said old Rhys Hoskins, yeah, you said it correctly. Old Rhys Hoskins. He's actually old Spencer Torkelson. That's what he is. That's what Rhys Hoskins is what Spencer Torkelson will be in 11 more years. So, my theory, look, Rhys could really hit the ball out of the ballpark for a long time. He's played in 2 really great home run parks, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. Yes, he hit 26 homers, but if I'm going to take a broken down version of Spencer Torkelson, and basically we did this for Milwaukee last year when we took the corpse of Mark Canha, who we thought might be able to help us, and we had to wheel him out, and he became essentially a ghost of himself. To be really blunt about it, I would prefer to roll the dice on $800,000 Spencer Torkelson coming back before I took Rhys Hoskins. So that's my short, down and dirty feeling about the Rhys Hoskins idea. I'm going to pass on that one. The next one I'm a little more interested in. So the Orioles are probably willing to move on from Ryan Mountcastle. He's given him some adequate production for a few years, not super expensive. They're probably pretty happy to take something meager for him. And he does have some upside. Talk to us about Ryan Mountcastle.
Yeah, I don't know about taking something meager. I still think it would cost a little bit to get him just because of what he's done in the past. Like, he's been an above average hitter. Now, not nearly an elite hitter, but an above average hitter in each of his 5 MLB seasons. He has the free swinging approach that the Tigers probably hate. It doesn't really fit well within their style and the way that they try to teach their hitters. So that's a little bit of a question mark. But at the same time, like, Ryan Mountcastle is under team control for 2 more seasons. He's projected to earn approximately $6.6 million in his second of 3 years of salary arbitration before reaching free agency after the 2026 season. The Orioles, they'd expressed interest in trading him because they've got 2 top 100 prospects in Kobe Mayo and Samuel Basallo who are ready to play first base and contribute there at the big league level. So when you have 2 guys that are top 100 prospects, I mean, these guys are both like in the top 20. I mean, they're the real deal, Kobe Mayo and Samuel Basallo. It makes sense that they would want to move on from Ryan Mountcastle. But again, let's not sleep on Ryan Mountcastle and what he's done. Like, he hit .271 with 13 home runs, 27 walks, and 114 strikeouts in 124 games in the 2024 season. He has that high chase, low walk approach. Again, does not fit the Tigers, but he makes enough contact to benefit from hitting the ball hard. That's the one benefit that he has, is he does make a ton of contact, even though he's going to chase a lot and he's going to swing out of the zone. And I think, if you're looking at a 32-year-old Ryan Mountcastle, you're going to stay away from that kind of approach. But this guy's 27. He's still young. He's got 2 years on his deal before he gets to free agency. And I understand the high chase, low walk approach. It's not fun. It reminds you of Javi Baez. But this guy makes a ton of contact, which benefits him because he hits the ball hard. So because he's expendable, I think it makes sense that the Orioles would need to add MLB-ready starting pitchers at the upper level of the minor leagues. And that's why in the deal, I have him taking back right-hander Ty Madden and left-hander Lyle Lockhart. And Ty Madden is a guy who he pitched in AA Erie, AAA Toledo, and then also pitched out of the bullpen in the big leagues, making his big league debut in 2024. He could end up as a fastball slider reliever, but he has the upside to be a back-of-the-rotation starter. Due to his developing splitter. So if he has fastball slider splitter, I think Ty Madden can be a starter. And then Lyle Lockhart, yes, he's AAA depth because his fastball averages just 88, 89 miles an hour, but his splitter has an unbelievable 55% whiff rate. So these are 2 guys that are in the top 30 on MLB pipeline in the Tiger system. Ty Madden, number 14, Lyle Lockhart at number 26. The Orioles need as much pitching depth as they can get in guys who can contribute at the big league level. I think it's an interesting swap. I want to know what you think, Mark. Tigers acquiring first baseman Ryan Mountcastle, Orioles acquiring right-hander Ty Madden and Lyle Lockhart, a left-hander in his case. Would you do that deal or no?
Yes, I'd do that deal. Look, Tigers are going to start developing plus acquiring at the fringes more and more pitching prospects or pitching projects. Ty Madden's still a pitching project. You're 3 years into it. And yeah, there were some interesting things I saw that they had finally tweaked. His fastball command was a little better. I really liked the split he was working on. It was really, really interesting. Lyle Lockhart, probably a reliever. Maybe a really interesting reliever because the slider's so good. But at the end of the day, I think Ryan Mountcastle is probably an upgrade over Spencer Torkelson. Maybe less ceiling, more floor. I think he's got a higher floor than Torkelson. He's got less possibility of hitting 30 home runs and will walk less. But look, people, you got to improve first base. You just cannot be a championship caliber baseball team having a first baseman with a sub 100 WRC plus. It's just, you can't do it. And the Tigers need more offense. So you're going to have to roll the dice a few times. And, look, this is Ryan Mountcastle's plan C or plan D. But you do have to upgrade there, and you have to compare it to what they have. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're going to make Justin Henry Malloy at first baseman anytime soon from what we've been able to find out. And if that's not happening, we just Spencer Torkelson and that's it. So Mountcastle's probably a really, really solid idea. All right, it's been a really interesting week for us. You got a Vlad Guerrero Jr. trade idea. We talked to AJ Hinch for a half hour. We discussed some trades. You're going to San Antonio. Maybe the GM meetings will bring some information because nobody's a better researcher and information gatherer than Evan Petzold. But it should be an interesting week coming up. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Offseason starts now.
All right, it's time to get out of here. I want to remind everybody, please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, freep.com. You can always find us embedded in every Evan Petzold article at thefreep.com, even if you have to look for it hard in the off-season here. I'd like to thank Free Press editor Cole Avery Nichols. I'd like to thank Robin Chan, who has rescued us like usual this week. Should actually pay him double for this week. Love to my grandson, this spectacular Braden Michael Gorash. Shout out to Savannah Petzold. And until next week, peace.